All right, so this morning we're going to build a nested CRUD app. So we've been building CRUD apps single resource meaning like an animal you can create, read, update, and destroy one single animal. And right now we're going to deal with a nested CRUD app, which is like a manufacturer has many products, a class has many students. We're going to do classes with students today, and we'll see how far we can get. So we can get with classes, and we have students. So we have two tables. How are these two tables related? Does a class have many students? Does a student have many classes? Like, what do you think?
Yes to both.
Yes to both. All right, we just made this a lot more complicated. Let's choose two different resources. Let's not make it so complicated. Let's do one where it's just like one belongs to the other, not one has many of the other.
Well, but what about platoons?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, platoons and a student. So we're talking about like Delta Platoon had X number of students, and those students just belong to Delta Platoon. Similarly, we have students that belong to this platoon. So we have platoons. How are these two related? A platoon has many students, and a student belongs to one singular platoon. So I know that I can add a field here called platoon ID, and then connect this with this right here. So a student belongs to a platoon, and a platoon has many students. Let's say a student has a first name, and then a student also has a last name. Obviously, there are more things than just this, but we just want to see something show up on the screen. All right, so a platoon also has a name. How do people feel about this this database? It's fairly simple. Platoon has a name. A student has a first name, last name, and a student belongs to a platoon. All right, so I'm okay with this to get started. Let's go with it. So first things first, I'm going to create my Rails app, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. So let me grab it from the curriculum. All right, so I gem install Rails. And this is the command that I run here. I'm going to change it from businesses. Maybe I'll change it to code platoon. Wait, I can't do that. I guess I can do that. I want to stop this. I may have just overwritten all of my stuff. I did overwrite all of my stuff. Oh no, I just added it in there. That's okay. I'll deal with this. Okay, code platoon. I'll just call this code platoon Rails. While that is running in the background, I'm going to delete all the stuff that I just unfortunately put in here. Get rid of this. This. Good. How did everyone's weekend go? You might be sitting here for a while.
Good.
All right. So we start off with let me just drop this. It's probably gross. All right, so we ran this Rails new thing. So we've created our Rails app called Code Platoon Rails, and we're just going to start off by changing directory into Code Platoon Rails. I'm going to bundle install just to make sure that everything's installed correctly. I know that I'm going to need a few things right off the bat. I probably need a pry of some sort so I can debug my code. So I'm just going to add that anywhere inside of here. So gem pry. I'm going to rebundle. Bundle install and bundle are the same thing. So you can type in bundle and your computer will automatically know to bundle install. You don't need to type bundle install every single time. All right. So first things first, like we were doing way back in week number 4 with all of this database setup, we draw our database and then we create our migrations. So we can either go inside of DB, create a migrate folder, and then do all this stuff manually, or we can run the Rails migration. It's a little bit easier, so I'm going to run bundle exec Rails G migration called create platoons and create students. Create platoons. And bundle exec Rails G migration is something that's built into Rails, and all it really does is create a file for you. But it's just much less typing than to actually type out the entire timestamp. So I'm under DB, there's going to be a migrate folder that wasn't there before. And then inside of there is this first migration right here. After that, I'm going to create one called students. And all we're doing is just creating a file, but it's just much less stuff to type. Now, when we fly back over here, we see a platoon has a name, a student has a first name and last name, and belongs to a platoon. This one's pretty simple. I'll split the screen into 2. So on the left here, I have platoons. I know that we don't need to do anything for like ID numbers because Rails gives that to us for free. So a platoon has a name. So t.string for name and t.timestamps. What are timestamps on line 5?
When it was created and updated.
Yep, that gives you these 2 things called created at and updated at. And every single time that you touch the database to create a record, it'll update the created at and updated at. If you update your record, it'll automatically update the updated at. These are things that Rails gives to you for free. So I have students and t.belongs to a platoon, t.string for first name, t.string for last name, and t.timestamps. Feel okay? All right. So when I create these things right here, I'm going to run bundle exec Rails DB drop, just in case it exists on my computer to begin with, just to give myself a clean starting slate. So this is going to drop the database. This is something that's broken on my computer, so you can ignore it. I'm going to drop the database, so I'm just have a completely clean place to start. Nothing's going on. So I have no database whatsoever. When I run Rails DB create, it's going to create for me an empty database. Completely empty, no tables, no columns, nothing. And I'm going to run the migrate command. Migrate will just create the tables and all the columns, but nothing inside there yet. So it's just an empty database as of right now with these 2 particular tables. Those tables have columns on there. So that's step number 1, draw your database, create your migrations. And then step 2 is to create your models. Now, models are found under app models, and these are the things that connect directly to your database. As of right now, it's like you created the tables and you created the columns, but there's no way for Rails to talk with the database yet. I'm going to create a new file, and they're going to be the singular version of the tables I just created. So I'm going to call one called platoon.rb and save it inside of models. And then I'm going to create one more file called student.rb. Throw it in here as well.
I think at the beginning you could have done Rails generate model and
Yep.
created a migration and the model.
That is correct, yeah. So there's another generator that Danny was talking about called Rails G model. So earlier I ran Rails G migration. If you do Rails G model, called like Platoon or something like that, it will create both a Platoon model file and a create Platoons migration. I just have never, I'm not used to running that one. So it's nice to have. I would do that one instead of what I'm teaching you right now. I'm going to do class Platoon, which is going to inherit from application record. And then the same thing for student. Class student going to inherit from application record. Now, you may be wondering, like, why am I inheriting from application record? So as of right now, if I didn't have this less than sign, this is called a poro, a plain old Ruby object. It doesn't connect to the database. It doesn't do anything in terms of like what you want it to. Like this doesn't connect to the database because it's not inheriting from anything. By inheriting from application record, which is located right above it, it's that application record is inheriting from active record base. So it's the equivalent of saying, I inherit as a child, I inherit stuff from my parents. My parents inherited stuff from my grandparents. Thus, I inherit stuff from my grandparents. If A is B and B is C, then A is C kind of thing. So similarly, Platoon inherits from application record. Application record inherits from active record base. So thus, Platoon inherits from active record base, which means that Platoon is allowed to connect to the database table. And we can do all of our migrations, our associations here. So a platoon has many students, and a student belongs to a platoon. I think that's all we need to do for models. Let's create some seed data, and hopefully it'll work. You can delete all of this stuff first. Maybe we'll create one platoon. So we'll do platoon.create, and then the name is going to be Echo, because we are currently in Echo. And then we're going to create a bunch of students. Student.create, first name, something, last name, something else, and then platoon ID is going to be 1. We'll create all the students here. I've created my platoon. I've created all the students in here. So what we ran up to this point was RailsDB drop. I dropped the database. RailsDB create. I created an empty database. RailsDB migrate. I created the empty database, and I shoved all the tables in with all the columns. Now I'm going to run this one called seed. The seed is going to basically insert. It's the equivalent of SQL's insert into table. So I'm inserting a bunch of records inside of the database. And let's take a look at what we've got. So I can run bundle exec Rails console. I've aliased it to just C because I'm very lazy. And let's take a look at all the platoons that we have. Platoon.all. Looks like there's only one of them. That's what we expect. So I'm going to do A equals underscore. That first. All right, so I have my first platoon. If all goes well, I can just go A.students because a platoon has many students. You can kind of see when I do that, I have all of these students inside of here. It looks like I have Raymond, and I have Aaron, I have Sharif, and Kimberly, and everybody that's inside of this class. Let's just choose a random. Let's just choose the last student. All right, so we have Michael Lynn. Let's say B equals underscore, so B is equal to Michael Lynn. If all goes well, I can go the opposite direction. B.platoon. You can see a student belongs to a platoon, and a platoon has many students. So we've set up everything correctly. All right. From here, so we set up our database correctly. Let's start talking about different routes. Now, one thing I did not teach last week, but Mike may have taught it to you. So routes are found under config routes. Now I just want to do CRUDing for one resource. We'll take a break, and then we'll CRUD the nested one. You can obviously do get/platoons and stuff like that to platoon index kind of thing. You can write out all the CRUD for a platoon. You can create a platoon, update and read and destroy. Like you can do all of that stuff through this, or there's a shortcut called resources for platoon. But as of right now, let's watch what happens when I don't have this and I run a command that's very useful called bundle exec Rails routes. Bundle exec Rails routes will list out all the routes that are currently available inside of your app. Right now it says you don't have any routes. That's totally okay. When I add resources platoon, this will add in all the routes that I need to create, read, update, and destroy. It's one of those like built-in things so you don't have to worry about it as much. So remember, it said nothing before. We're going to run it one more time. And you can kind of see now this is what we get. We have platoon index. When we go to get oh, this is platoons, I'm sorry. It's plural. So we can look at all of the platoons. We can create a new platoon. We can get the form for a new platoon. We can edit a platoon. We can take a look at each individual one. We can create a platoon. So that one line called resources platoons gives me access to all of these different routes. And this is all the stuff that's kind of like built in as of right now. Now I haven't created a platoons controller or any of this stuff quite yet, but just by adding that one tiny little line, resources platoons, I have the access. I have all of these different routes that I can go to visit. So I'm going to load up the server by running bundle exec Rails server. I've aliased it to S because I am lazy. We're going to jump over, and if I'm not mistaken, if I can make a GET request to /platoons using this resources platoons. So localhost 3000 /platoons. And we're going to do something that I call error-driven development instead of test-driven development. It says there's an uninitialized constant called platoons controller. What do you think the issue is?
No control.
No controller. Where are controllers found? App controllers. All right, so I'm going to create a new controller called platoons controller, RB. Do class platoons controller, which inherits from application controller. All right, let's refresh this page. What do we get? All right, so it shows the action index could not be found for platoons controller. What's the issue? I do need the method index. Refresh it one more time. Now it says I'm missing a template, which means that I don't have a view for it. All right, no problem. I'm just going to jump down to views, create a folder called platoons. And then underneath this, I'll create my first view called index.html.erb. Remember, the name of your file, the view file, is going to match up directly with the name of the method inside the controller. I'm just going to write poop and refresh the page. And phenomenal. We have the word poop that shows up on the page. That being said, this is not what we actually want to see. So when we go to /platoons, if you remember from last week, /platoons will list me every single platoon that I have. So with that, I need to do some sort of logic inside the controller before I can pass that information down to the view. What is that thing I need to do? Yep, all platoons. I will just create an H1 for all platoons. All right, so all at platoons equals platoon.all. So again, the controller, this is the MVC framework. MVC, M stands for model. It's the thing that connects to your database. This capital P, that's the model that we created right at the beginning, right here. That's the thing that connects to your database. The V is the view, what shows up on the screen. And then C is the controller, the brains of the operation. This is the thing that talks to the database and feeds all the data into your views. So I have all my views, all my platoons, and I'm just going to do %sign for code that I'm going to be running that's Ruby. So I'm going to do @platoons, each do platoon. And I'm going to just Just I'll create a list or something like that. So let's see, when I refresh this, this poop will go away, and we'll say all platoons, and the first one just says echo. Cool. So we're able to see all of the platoons as of right now. I'm not a big fan of just having a list here. Maybe we'll have a link. So we can either create an ahref, or we learned about Rails helpers on Friday. Mike taught you about Rails helpers. Is there a helper to help me create a link?
Link to.
Link to, okay. I do like that. It is link to. Link to. And then link to takes a couple of arguments. The first one is what's going to show up on the screen. And the second one is actually what the route is going to be. So maybe we'll just do link to, and we'll do platoon.name. So this is the thing that's going to show up on the screen. And then we have to actually write the path that shows up. So what is the Rails helper to give me the specific path?
It would be the controller underscore path.
It's not controller underscore path. So this is where that Rails, that bundle exec Rails routes comes into play again. Exec Rails routes. So there are two ways of doing things. One of them, I can just say, let's type it the regular way. Let's do Platoon. So link to is a Rails helper. It creates a link for you. It needs two things. The first thing is what shows up on the page. And the second one is the route that it actually needs to go to. For us, we can just go to like maybe slash platoon slash platoon ID or something like that. So if I refresh this page, you can kind of see what shows up on the page is the name of the platoon. And the second argument is like, if you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner, it says slash platoon ID. Like you can write in whatever you'd like at that particular point. You can hard code it here, or you can use what's called a view helper. So if you take a look at all these prefixes over here, I can just say platoons underscore path, and then it knows by default to take me to slash platoons. If I went to new platoon underscore path, it would take me by default to slash platoon slash new. So let's just say that we wanted to go to this platoon, like one individual platoon. So I will go to platoon path, platoon underscore path. And then by default, it needs something called an ID inside of here. If you take a look under slash platoons or slash platoons slash new, it doesn't require you to provide it anything. Unfortunately for this one down here, it says that platoon path can change over time based off of what ID that you pass it. So I can do platoon path and pass an ID of platoon.id. Let's see if this works. I'm going to refresh the page. It shows up correctly. The platoon's name shows up. And if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, it says platoons underscore 1. So I can just hard code it, just say like inside of double quotations slash platoon slash 1. But in the case that you ever decide to change this to like platoons, like cohort platoons or something like that, you need to change it every time that you hard code it as well. So all I have to do here is just provide a platoon path and provide it the ID. If you want to take it one step even further, because you have the entire object here on line 4, you can just take it to platoon. And if I refresh the page, it'll still take me to the same place. I feel like I lost everyone on those helpers right there. Or are you good?
I think that last part where you erased, how's that equivalent to the ID? To
Sure.
This entire object?
Sure. So when you pass in an entire object, this object is one individual entry of the platoon database, right? So you have the database, you have a table called platoons, and you have one entry inside the database that's saved as platoon right now. Because you have that entire object has an ID built into it, and Rails is just smart enough to know that when you have an entire object, I need to go to that particular place.
Say object, you mean entire row, right?
Yes.
But that won't work with the nested.
That will not work with the nested, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's only on the outermost layer. So I can just pass in the entire object, and then I have the ability to go here. So as of right now, I can see all of them. I need to go to each individual one. This is going to blow up. It says could not find the show action for Platoon's controller. Simple, def show, and then I'm going to need to find the Platoon ahead of time. So platoon.find params ID. I created a view. I created a controller method, which means I also need to create its corresponding view. So show.html, ERB. Then I'll just do platoon.name. But as of right now, I have all the platoons. I can just take a look at each individual one. So I have the read completely finished, all of them and the individual one. Let's create a quick link to go back. So I'll do, Aaron said link to. I'm going to do back, and I'm going to send myself to the main platoons page. So I'm going to get you started. Link to is a Rails helper. The first argument is going to be what word shows up on the page. The second one is where it actually goes. Which one of these is the correct thing, the correct prefix that I'm going to use? Mm-hmm. Correct. So I can do platoons path. It's one of those built-in Rails helpers that they give to us for free. I refresh here. There's my link. And if I hover over it, if you take a look in the bottom left-hand corner, it says /platoons. That platoons path actually automatically just generated a link for me that takes me back to /platoons. If I hit back, here we are. So we can read everything pretty well. So we did read. Let's go back to the C. So in order to do this correctly, we see that we need to create a form for the /new. Pretty simple. So if I go to, let's create a link right here. So on the main index page, I'm going to have maybe right above all platoons, maybe I'll have one for create a new platoon. So I have another link to. And maybe I'll say new platoon. And then which route will I use to use my Rails helpers? Which one of the prefixes will take me to the new page? Okay, so what do I type here? New platoon path. When I refresh this here, there's that new platoon. It shows up, and if you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner, it takes me to /platoons/new. I'm going to click on this. It's obviously going to blow up. I had a question.
Sorry, does it work without the path?
It does not work without the path. If I take this out right here, and I go back to /platoons, it's going to say, I don't know what new platoon is. Do you mean new platoon URL? Do you mean new platoon path? I've actually never used URL. Maybe that'll work. Let's find out. Oh, yeah. New platoon path, new platoon URL. Evidently, it is synonymous. Pick and choose however you wish.
Whenever you're using the prefixes for the routes,
Mm-hmm.
you always use path or link to.
Yes, most of the time, yeah. For purposes of where we are right now, yes. All right, so I'm going to take me to my new Platoon URL. I click on this button real quick. Takes me to the point where it says action new could not be found. Not an issue. Def new. And I'm going to create a corresponding view for it. So new.html.erb. Maybe I'll do this real quick. Create a new Platoon. And then I'll just have a form. Hey. You know what? Let's go with form 4. Did we learn about form 4 on Friday? Yep, form 4. So there's another, in case we're not remembering, there's another Rails helper called form 4, because a lot of people, the entire web is one giant form. From logging in to entering your credit card information to doing anything, most of the web is one giant form. So instead of typing out all of the HTML code that's involved with a form, they have something called form 4. This will take care of most of the things for you. So let's just kind of copy and paste what we've got here. Create a new Platoon. So I'm going to create a form 4 person do F. All right, so it's probably not going to be person. I'll probably need to change the noun to Platoon. And it looks like I only need a few things. I probably just need a Platoon name. So this tiny little bit of code, lines 2 through 5, essentially create a giant form for us. So I'm just going to, let's just take a look at what happens when I refresh this page. And let's see, like those 4 lines of code, what HTML it generated in its place. So if I inspect the element here, lines 2 through 5 on using our Rails helper created a form that looked like this. It was, all of this stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I typed in 4 lines of code rather than 8 lines of code. It shortened it down for me. So as of right now, it says form 4 Platoon do F, and then and it just says Platoon name and then the submit.
John, so the Platoon name, that could be anything there, but you go back to your code.
Yeah, I know what you're going for. Yeah. So the first on line 3, the question was, Platoon name can be anything, but the colon name needs to be something like that needs to be named correctly. Is that right?
That needs to be a column. And,
yeah, pretty much. So line 3 is broken up into 2 things. This first half is basically what shows up on the screen. So I can change this to anything. Poop. Refresh the page, and then that shows up on the page, which says anything poop. That's literally anything that will show up on the screen. The important part is this section right here. It's saying that on this form, it's going to be a text field, and whatever they enter is going to be saved to param's name. I'm going to be using that at a different point. So let's see if anything works. I will do the next one, which is Foxtrot. Save and see what happens. Okay, there's no route that matches post platoons/new. Not a big fan of this because this is saying that when I post, it's going to platoons/new, but I actually want it to post to just /platoons. So I'm going to go back to the documentation here. Let's take a look at what we've got. Form 4. Okay. It looks like I can actually pass in an entire object. So that's what I'm going to do. Under def new, I'm going to create just a random platoon. It's brand new, nothing's really going on quite yet. So instead of doing platoon form 4, just some arbitrary platoon, I'm actually going to populate that platoon I created on line 11 here in the platoons controller. So whenever I submit this, I'm coming back up to this particular platoon and seeing if I can like populate that particular object. All right, let's go back here. Page, Foxtrot is the next one. Create the platoon. The action create could not be found in Platoon's controller. Now remember what it said before when I was just doing Platoon like this, it was posting to /platoon/new, but that's not the RESTful route. The RESTful route says whenever you want to create a new platoon, you need to post to /platoons, not that particular, not a post to /platoon/new.
So does :platoon, what does that relate to or refer to?
That just says all platoons. Like I'm creating a new platoon, but I'm not specifying like which one.
So does that refer to an object?
It does not refer to an object. That's why I chose this one down here. So this one's form for with a model object. So this one's going directly to an object. The other one was just kind of arbitrary.
If you could name that whatever.
Well, this one is just saying, this one, form for, looks like the first thing is for some sort of record.
So it refers to a table.
I think it refers to the table. I think you're right. All right, so it says there's no create, so not an issue, def create. So we'll put a binding pry here, and we'll stop at this point. Go back to /platoon/new, refresh the page, Foxtrot, enter, and nothing's happening because we're inside of a pry session. Jump over here. Here's that pry session that we were stuck in. Make this a little bigger. Take a look at what params looks like. So inside of params here, I have all of this extra code, doesn't matter. The main thing I need to worry about is name. This is the big thing I'm looking for. So let's see if I can get from params to name. Let's say params name. Nope, I can't get there. Can I go to params platoon name? All right. Looks like I can. But at this particular point, I'm going to create a new platoon. I'll just do @platoon equals platoon.create with platoon params. I'm going to create a private method here at the bottom. And this private method at the bottom is what's called whitelisting parameters. You only want to allow things to come through that you say are good to come through. So for here, I'm just going to do params.require platoon .permit name. Then I'm going to redirect to @platoon. So I could do platoon path again and just pass in the ID number of the platoon that I just created. But in the case that so I could do this. Platoon path with ID of @platoon.id. This is synonymous with this. So lines 16 and 17 are identical. I figure line 17 is a little bit less to type, so I'm just going to comment this out and just do line 17. Right, exit here, nothing happens, that's fine. Let's go back over to this point. Great, so Foxtrot, create the platoon, and it's saved into the database. It's number 2, and it redirects me to this particular page right here. If I click the back button, you can see that I can see both of the 2 platoons that I have so far. I'm going to pause for any questions so far. So we're able to create and we're able to read thus far.
Yeah, that was a lot of stuff. Can you go back to the .permit method?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So can you explain that one more time?
Sure. So before Rails 5 came around, you were able to just kind of take whatever parameters were in the form and then just create like records based off of that. You didn't have to create this private method down at the bottom. The issue, as the web's gotten more advanced, that there's more attacks on it. You can technically, you don't need to fill out a form in order to hit these particular endpoints. So people can actually make requests directly to your database, and if you don't have anything to protect your database, they can just have like maybe like a SQL statement in there to like what was that? There was kind of a funny thing the other day. I learned that there was a person who drove through a toll inside of the UK, and they had a giant piece of paper on the front of their dashboard that says "drop table" instead of their license plate. Okay, so they drove straight through the tunnel. They didn't pay, obviously, and then they took a picture of it. When the camera took a picture of it, it also took a picture of drop table. So it dropped the entire table of everybody that was inside of every license plate. And it was just kind of as a joke to see if it worked. And then they found who it was, and they like yelled at him and like fined him and stuff like that. But it kind of just shows like the SQL injection. The SQL injection is basically I have SQL that's part of a form or part of params or something like that, and I'm just directly injecting your database. So like this person, I don't know how these people actually think of this, but to combat things like SQL injection, they have something called strong parameters. Strong parameters says, I'm only going to allow things inside of the database that I'm going to allow. Because you can kind of imagine params before looked a little something like this. This is everything that was inside of params. If I added something that was like some SQL statement that says like select all passwords and email addresses from users, and I didn't protect against that, I could technically SQL inject your site and get all of those results out. And that's not what you want to do. So by having these what's called strong parameters, I'm only going to allow certain things to come through. So for me, I'm requiring the Platoon key, and I'm only permitting the name to come through at the end. I don't care about the UTF-8. I don't care about the authenticity token. I don't care about any of this stuff. This is the section that I care about. I'm only allowing things under the Platoon keyword to come in, and inside of there, I'm only allowing the name to come in.
Thank you.
Yep. What do you guys want to do? You want to keep going, or you want to take a break? We're going to do update and destroy, and then we'll be done with the first half. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.